Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Bass Chaplain Fishing Podcast. It is Friday, and we are so very glad that you have chosen to join us. Hey, if you haven't subscribed to our channel, wherever you get your podcast, wherever you're listening, just hit that subscribe button. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can just hit the red subscribe button, and it'll let you know when we have a podcast drop. It's every Friday at 12. You don't want to miss any. We're going to have a great show for you today. But before we do, I want to give a big shout out to the people over at Elizabeth Chapel in Gallipolis, Ohio. I finally said that correctly. I usually call it G-Town, Ohio. I had a fantastic time. They brought me in to speak for their wild game banquet on a Saturday night. Then I stayed over and preached at their church on a Sunday morning, and we just saw God move. We saw people saved. We saw Christians repenting of sin. It was an awesome time. If you're looking for a great church and you're around Gallipolis, Ohio, you need to check out Elizabeth Chapel. They are an awesome church. Care about people and care about people that are lost, care about people that are saved. Great people over there. Big shout out to my buddy Nick and big shout out to my buddy Mike. Mike runs a place called Wide Rack Outfitters. Now, let me tell you, this dude has killed about everything you can kill with a bow, and it is an amazing setup he's got there. If you want to go trophy buck hunting with a bow, Wide Rack Outfitters. You need to type it in Google and check it out. Those guys are awesome. Let me show you what else they did for me. They gave me a shirt. Now look at this, it's become my favorite shirt. In loving memory of Pam Wells. It just moved my heart. What an awesome group of people over there. And I had such a good time, so much fun getting to share with them and getting to experience all that God is doing over there at Gallipolis, Ohio, an awesome place. Now today, going to have a little different show for you today. Don't have a bass pro on today, but we've got a guy that is heavily involved in the bass fishing industry. Today, we're going to talk about the business side of bass fishing with a guy who does media. JD Blackburn is going to be my host today, live from Nashville, Tennessee. Don't miss it. Coming up on the Bass Chaplain Fishing Podcast, where faith and fishing hook up. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Bass Chaplain Fishing Podcast. I have as my guest today, all the way from Nashville, Tennessee, JD Blackburn. JD, how's it going today, man?
Great, Chris. How are you?
And I'm doing super. I tell you, it's been a good week. I just got back from Ohio, and we had a blast. I stayed over at this guy's house named Mike, and he's like a trophy deer hunting management place, and it was awesome, man. I tell you, he had a trophy room. He's killed any kind of animal you can name. He's killed with a bow, except for one animal. He killed a big sheep with a rifle, but everything else, even an alligator, he killed an alligator with a bow. I mean, I didn't know you could kill an alligator with a bow, and so it was pretty cool. So that's what I ended up doing. Well, JD, let me tell you. So I love your story. We've been friends for a long time. I love you for so many different reasons. One of the reasons, you always let me stay with you. You're the only guy on the Bassmaster Tour and Major League Fishing that would ever let me room with you, man. I appreciate that. You're the only one that puts up with me, and I really appreciate that. That's been really good for me, and a really
Absolutely.
cool deal.
Hey, and you're a great roommate. So if anybody has any questions, they can ask. But you're great. You always do the dishes. You're always good to go to the store. You always got a Bible laying around. Whatever it is that you'd ask in a roommate, Chris Wells can do it. So,
man, I appreciate that. So let's delve into your story. I really wanted to talk to people today about the business side of fishing. Okay. And so many people, when they think, professional fishing, they think that I'm going to be that guy that's out in the boat and going out there and trying to catch 5 fish or however many fish you want to catch in Major League Fishing. And I'm going to be a bass pro and I'm going to get the deals. But there's so much more to the fishing industry that people never see. And there's so much more that young people never see. And you were an accountant, and you're doing great as an accountant, liking your job, but all of a sudden an opportunity presents itself to you and now you're not an accountant anymore. Tell us about how that happened. What happened? Tell us how it happened and what happened. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, I worked for one of the big firms, and then after I did that, I worked in healthcare, and had a good friend that I fished with, and he hired me on it. So we got into healthcare management. So I was doing some accounting work and finance work, and then as I kind of moved up a little bit, I got to do a little bit more sales type work, development work, and I saw how we were managing physicians and their facilities, and we were doing well, adding a lot of value. And I thought, well, this is good. I like working in a management role. And couple companies got bought out, and I had a situation where I if I stayed and worked and did a good job for 5-6 months, I'd get paid for like another year after. Right. So I got a young family, but a great God. I'm thankful that I recognized the opportunity that it was. And so I had about a whole year and a half really to kind of think, what do I want to do with the rest of my life? What an opportunity that was. And so, met with some people that knew me well, and they said, man, you got to get into fishing. And so I set about trying to figure out how to get into fishing at that point. And met some pros. Randy Howell was a great influence. Bill Lowen was wonderful. Let me learn all kind of things because I did not know what I was doing. And so learned what those guys needed as fishermen, and then eventually learned what companies needed by working with those guys. And so that's been 16 years now.
So that was 16 years ago. Wow. You've been doing this a long time. Now tell us, Pro Fishing Management. Tell us what you do.
Well, it started out working with individual anglers, helping them get sponsorship, get marketing put together, things like that. And as social media grew, started working on social media, and you started having companies, sponsors in the fishing industry that said, hey, we want some photos, we want some videos. Can you write articles? Can you get us in magazines, online, things like that? So kind of some PR marketing type stuff. And just really enjoyed learning how to take photos and edit videos. And it's just kind of grown every year. And then eventually started having some companies say, hey, we'd like to contract with you as well. And you work for us in addition to those anglers. And so that's been a big part of it as well. So I really enjoy taking these anglers who I have so much respect for. I think you do as well. Just the skills that they have, the knowledge. I know I would never become a bass pro, never could, not good enough. These guys have that talent, and they have things that they know they've learned, and they don't really realize how special it is. And so that's my job, is to be able to take that knowledge and help them promote themselves, and also help the companies promote their brands by associating with these guys and learning. There's a lot that people can learn from these guys. And so that's the part I really enjoy. I love talking
so
business.
I love that. And you taught yourself. I mean, one of the things I always, that you always bring to the table with me and makes me think and makes me grow is you always say, I love to learn things. I've heard you say that over and over again. I love to learn things. You taught yourself how to be a photographer, how to do the media side of pro fishing management. How did you do that?
Well, YouTube is great. Other photographers are great. There's a guy that's the main photographer at MLF, Garrick Dixon, taught me a ton. Learned a lot from him. Sago, James Overstreet, these guys that are at the tournaments. Something about photographers, they're willing to share information with you. Andy Crawford, Shane Durance, Dalton, all these guys that are really good at it. Phoenix at MLF, they will show you things. It's really cool. And fishermen are pretty good about that as well, but photographers will really help you. So if I've ever had a question, those guys have been great. And then just trial and error, learning, seeing other, photographs and seeing what I could do and how they shot that. So I've really enjoyed it. Hey, look at your set though. I think people want to realize you've taught yourself a lot there, because you started talking about a podcast, and then you started talking about video, And I thought, we'll see. Chris isn't the most
Well, you were the guy I
technological.
called. You were the first guy I called. And I said, what kind of camera? I said, I called you up, and another guy told me you need to get the camera that I got. And I called you up and you go, yeah, that's what I shoot. And, you showed me, the camera and how to do it. So, man, I got same thing, but I really have a hard time learning new things. I found that the older I get, the harder it becomes for me to want to really learn new things. And so the podcast was a very, very big step of faith for me. And I got a long way to go, and headed to a podcast convention this week. So let me ask you, what kind of companies do you work with? Who are some of the fishing companies that you currently work with?
Well, I've got a whole list on my website, profishingmanagement.com. The one that I worked with the longest is Triton Boats.
Yeah.
It's been great. I have a Triton boat, and so working with Triton and Bass Pro Shops, as an extension of that. And so that's a great example of companies that I work with, and love boats and love motors, and just love being around it, and love seeing those presented in a cool way, whether it's a photo or a video, or with a pro doing it, or it's my boat, my motor, whatever it is.
So let's set this up. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So for the kid that's watching right now, or the kid that's listening right now, and he says, okay, so what this guy does, walk us through a typical day of, like, all right, you're at a Bassmaster tournament, or you're at a Major League Fishing event. And I've seen you, I've watched you, and let me tell you folks, this guy, when he is on his job, he is on his job. He is doing it, and it's really cool to watch him do it. But you've incorporated drones in your footage, and all of this footage are like new footage every single tournament. And you go to the social media sites, and you are basically putting those pictures and those video footage up for all these companies to see. So when I'm looking at Instagram, and I'm looking at wherever it is on Facebook that I get my fishing fix from, a lot of times I'm looking at pictures from JD Blackburn. Is that right?
Yeah. And I'd rather not be in the public eye as far as, that goes. You won't ever see my name or video by me, anything like that. I always want to just kind of represent the company, or even if it's a fisherman's photo, just, I've been doing it a long time, and most people don't know who I am, and that's totally great. But yeah, learning how to fly a drone, got my license. So I got to go through that whole process, and got to learn it. And I've got a bunch of different cameras, and I always like to have one new thing at every tournament. So it's either some kind of new piece of equipment, or a new approach, or a new technique. So that way I'm always kind of learning. It never gets stale. And now getting to go to Bassmaster events and Major League Fishing events, they're so different, so many different opportunities. That kind of keeps it fresh as well. And so
walk us through your day. So I've seen your day, and so, like, the alarm clock goes off. What do you do on a Bassmaster tournament morning or a Major League Fishing morning?
Yeah, well, I like to get there early, and so usually, get there early, and you can get some neat photos. And so try to get some good photos. I'll take a light with me, and I've got some good lenses that'll let me shoot in the dark, and so kind of get some photos, kind of set the scene. Obviously with guys, when they take off, just talking to guys, whether it's helping set up a GoPro, something like that. Try to get some scenery in there. I love a sunrise. So, maybe if my drone's up in the air, it can capture the sunrise, follow a boat or two out, get some B-roll, some good slow-mo. I just love seeing boats running, taking off. Just trying to help tell the story. So, if a guy's had a great day the first day, and maybe he caught him on a certain, Rapala bait, I want to try to get a picture with him and that bait. So I want to maybe get a little quote from him. And then, we watch these guys all day, right? So we kind of know what's going on. So I'm watching it during the day to kind of see and making mental notes of things I want to ask them about. And just like a fan, I'm a fan of this. More so than I ever have been. I love watching bass tournaments and love seeing the guys compete. I like to learn. I get to fish some, so I want to learn myself. And then so during the day, there's that going on, getting things ready. And then the afternoon, they come back in. Sometimes we get to shoot, videos. If it's a Major League Fishing event, might get together with Ott or somebody like that I do some work with, and shoot a product video. And then kind of start working on that, editing it, and not a lot of social time. I mean, it's kind of a 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. type of deal. Yeah, like you said, I'm working.
So yeah, you are, and I've seen you do it, so many times. Well, let me ask you this. One of the coolest things I ever saw you do, I think we were maybe up at St. Lawrence or somewhere like that, and you were flying your drone, and you said, "Hey, see that ship over there? I'm about to put my drone over the top of that ship," and there was a ship going through the channel, and you flew that drone up and got the coolest shots I've ever seen in my life. Flying that drone around, and it makes me want to go get a drone. I'm telling you, but I know what I'd do. I'd probably crash it in the first 10 minutes, and it would be all over. But it's pretty wild. All that happens. Well, listen. So who are some of the anglers that you work with? Who are some of those guys, and who are some who are some people that you've enjoyed working with over the years, and tell us a little bit about it. Like, say an angler calls you up and they say, JD, I need help. What would your advice be to them, and what would you offer them? So let's give the guys out there a little more of a deal of what it takes, because social media, there's nothing I believe that has changed the sport of bass fishing outside of the physical, the forward facing sonar, power poles, spot lock, trolling motors, things like that. But social media has really become, like in the old days, what you would do is you try to sell, companies and things. If you're a pro fisherman, you try to walk in there and go, hey, this is what I have to offer to you. I'm a great fisherman. I talk to this many people a year. But now it's pretty much, what's your social media like? And so those guys realize, man, it would take me all day to put up the content that I need to be able to produce in social media. I need a guy like JD Blackburn to come in and help me do that. Walk us through some of that. What does that look like?
Yeah. So, and it's kind of changed over the years. The guys I work with now, Ott Defo and Bradley Roy on Major League Fishing.
Right.
And then Brandon Lester, Bill Lowen on the Elite Series. You mentioned social media. That's a huge part of it. And what is your platform? But one of the things that we've seen over the years is fans, they want to see the real life of these guys, right? So they don't necessarily want to see my view of those guys. They want to see their view, right? So typically it's the angler's family, kids, if they're involved, that is creating the best content, right? The kind of the inside stuff, the real life things. And then I'm kind of supplementing with some of the cool, professional looking shots maybe, and at the events and things like that, videos and so forth. YouTube work, things like that. So, biggest thing is just, document your life. I mean, that's kind of what people think is interesting, and that's what they want to follow. That's what they're on social media for. I would tell people, don't be afraid of these newer platforms. TikTok is one that's getting super popular. So maybe an older guy like me has been a little bit slower to get onto that, but I would tell those guys to have a YouTube channel, and just do as much as you can for the companies that you're fortunate to work with. If a guy called up right now and said, hey, I need some help with sponsors, I would really, really have hesitated for a long time about working with anyone new. It is such a hard game to do. Sponsorship is really hard on fishermen. It really, really is. And so you've really got to just make the decision that I'm going to do this. I'm going to work as hard as I can. I'm going to catch fish as best as I can, and then work on the sponsors later, because it's really competitive and it's really challenging. So I'm fortunate that I got to do it when I did, and all this kind of came on. Social media has kind of come on since then, but yeah, social media is key. So I think that would be the advice that I would give someone.
That's good stuff right there. I know a lot of kids I run into, they just think that Andy Montgomery talks about this a lot. He thinks that those lures just crawl up in your boat and they just throw, money at you, and they throw, products at you, and all you have to do is go and fish and all that stuff. But there's a lot of work, and there's a lot of things those companies really require of those guys, to be able to be sponsored. And
yeah,
you're a big part of that.
Yeah. Well, one thing, the more they documented their life, the more, and they're fishing, the more that people will ask questions, more that companies might see it. You've got a company representative watching an Art Defo video and they see that he's doing something. They say, well, hey, that gives us this idea. Can we get a follow-up on that? Can we get more information on that video? And then you got fans asking about it and they say, well, where can we go buy this product? And then you can send them to, Bass Pro Shops to buy the product. So the more that you're out there and you're, in the public eye, that you're showing people, the more opportunities it's going to lead to. And then there's people that write, you've got writers that are out there and they may see this angler has created this video and they say, well, I want to call him, I'm working on this article about deep diving crankbaits. I saw Ott's video. I'm going to call him about it. Or I saw Brandon Lester or Bradley Roy or Bill Lowen talking about this. I'm going to call them. So the more you can put out there, the more interest you'll generate.
Man, you're really working with some great guys. I think we have at least 50% of them on the Bass Chaplain Fishing Podcast, and man, great. With Lester, and we're going to hopefully get Lester in the future. And love Bill Lowen. His family has been so good to me. When I'm on the passing of my wife, and he's just a great guy. I got a chance when I say fish with these guys, I ride with them. I get a chance to watch the guys a lot of times, and I've been in the boat, with those guys and just love them. And and of course we had Bradley on last week, and what a great testimony he had, and just awesome stuff. Those are some good guys. So you're a fisherman, and I see some fish in the background back there in your deal. You got some nice ones. Where did you catch those? And you've got the most interesting. You do a lot of creative things, and one of the creative things I've heard about you got a group of friends. And y'all try to catch a bass or a fish, any kind of fish. One of you in the group tries to catch one at least once a week. How did that start?
Okay, so real quick, those two fish were caught in 1974 and 1976. Wow. Okay, I was born in 1975. So my dad caught them.
Caught them, okay.
And I like to think that once I was older than one, he stopped catching big bass. I guess he was taking me fishing more and concentrating on that. But so I ruined his big bass days. But Camp Croft State Park in South Carolina, not far from you. I grew up in that area. Yeah. And I don't even know if that lake still has bass in it. I don't know.
I'm sure it does. Yeah. Yeah, we have some great state parks in South Carolina. We have some state parks that have some huge bass lakes in them, and so I even thought about doing a video one time on the state parks of South Carolina, and they just wouldn't let me put my nitro in there. So it was a pretty.
I don't remember what bass we had, but we would fish in there. But anyway, so the streak started in 2018, and so there's 11 guys. And we decided, for whatever reason, that every week we would catch a fish. Somebody would catch a fish, right? So we would start on a Monday. It would go through Sunday. And one of us during that week had to catch a fish, take a picture, and post it. And we've done it for 4+ years. We're over like 230 weeks in a row.
Wow.
So it's just something to talk about, something to help. Maybe we've gotten some extra fishing trips out of it over the years. We meet up at church and say, hey, has anybody caught one this week? Haven't seen it posted yet. And then somebody will go catch one. So
most of these guys are guys at your church that you hang
out. Yeah, guys from
That's
church.
Pretty cool. Now you're real involved in your church. And I know this because you guys were recently you put out your mission statement for your church. And I got to tell you, that thing is awesome. I love you put out a video about it. And I was just jacked up because I felt like I was a part of it. I felt like, you called me a couple of times when you guys were thinking about, what should you include in that? And I got a chance to put my 2 cents, worth into it. But you go to an exciting church. Tell us about your church, man.
Yeah, well, it's Brentwood Hills is the church here in Nashville. I live about a mile from it, so we've been here since 1994.
Right.
When I started going there. And that mission statement, I remember talking to you a lot, and you just said, "Hey, the simpler the better. Keep it simple. Don't make it too lengthy." And so I read an article one time, a guy was quoted, and he said, I've written you a long letter because I didn't have time to write you a short letter. And I've realized that the shorter something is, the more concise it is, the longer it really takes to make sure that every word is used properly and it's meaningful, right? And so I think a lot of times we get into these long, lengthy, what is the purpose of our church and what's the mission? And so we just realized, hey, let's go back to scripture. Let's figure out really what we're supposed to be doing. What does it mean to be a church, 21st century Nashville? There's lots of churches. What's the real purpose of a church? And so we've got a lot of great input, people all different ages at our church. And that's one of the great parts of our church is we've got young kids all the way up to a good senior ministry. So yeah, it's I think it's captured the essence of really what any church could look at and say, yeah, that's what we need to do too. That's the basics of it. But I think so many of us right now, since COVID has come along, just asking why am I doing this? Okay, I've done this for so long. Now I've got this time to sit and think about it. And that's when we started thinking about it. So it took a couple of years really of a lot of thought and prayer and discussion to get to that point. But you were definitely a big part of it. I mean, you said,
man, I was really excited about how excited that you guys got about, your mission statement. It is so, a lot of times a mission statement for a church is kind of an afterthought. It's just kind of, okay, that's our little jingle that we throw at people and nobody ever really thinks about it. But when a church takes the time to say, you know what, we're going to look at the scripture and decide what is it that we're supposed to be about, that's powerful. And God's using your church, and it's obvious. Now, listen, you played college baseball and at Lipscomb, is that right?
Lipscomb. Yep.
Lipscomb. Yeah. So what position did you play in baseball? I'm gonna get to your testimony in just a second, but I want to, people know that we're dealing with a college athlete here. So
yeah, played infield. I played third base and second base, and was a good defensive player, average hitter, and just worked hard at it and really, really loved it. I just remember how much I loved it and how serious I took it. Oh, I was so serious about it. So
yeah, so you brought that work ethic into, pro fishing management too, and so you're definitely a worker. So tell us about your journey to faith. How did you come to faith in Christ? One of the reasons we started the Bass Chaplain Fishing Podcast is to show people in the fishing industry who are followers of Christ. And I know that Jesus is the Lord of your life. Tell us how that happened, man. Tell us your story.
Sure. Well, very blessed to have a great family to grow up in. My father was a leader at our church. My mother worked at the church, and they were very consistent. And I saw the same thing at church that I saw at home. They were so authentic, and that's always stuck with me. And I always thank my parents for that. That they were so authentic. And I just, so many people today have a hard time at church because they think everybody's hypocrites, and a lot of that is just because they've seen that not be a part of someone's life, but they say it is. And so I was very blessed to see that. And so that was kind of the platform. We always went to church, but I always wanted to make sure that I wasn't doing it. I wasn't giving my life over to Christ just for them, right? Or anybody that told me I needed to, and I was 16. We lived up in Illinois, kind of a small church at that time. And I got to study in it. My sister wrote me a letter. It was wonderful. Such a nice gesture of her to send me a letter. Had teachers, saying, hey, do you know where you're going when you die? You're at the age where you can drive a car, you can make decisions. Do you know what the rest of your life is going to be about? And do you know what's going to happen to you when you pass away? And I just got to thinking about it. And then just one Sunday, we were at church, and then we had a guest preacher, gave the invitation, and I just stood up and I walked that aisle, and it was a great thing. It was an amazing experience. And so I gave my life over to Christ, and we had a baptistry there. And so our fellowship, always takes the Bible for its word. And the example was believer baptism, right? And so we had believers baptism, and, we didn't wait around. So there's baptistry there. And I said, yeah, I want to be baptized. And so funny story was the preacher, Dr. Milton Sewell was his name. And he got in, he had waders on, right? So he's got waders on. So he gets into the baptistry and he's ready for me to walk in. Well, I told you we believe in instant baptism,
Right,
spontaneous right
right,
then.
yeah.
Well, I stepped my foot in and something has gone wrong with the thermostat. Somebody's played with it.
And it's freezing cold.
Hot. It was
Hot.
You couldn't touch. I mean, he obviously had some really good waders because he couldn't feel it, but I stuck my toe in and I just kind of looked and it was a surreal moment. I'm like, I can't, I pulled my toe out and it was like red, my foot's red. And so I got baptized about 20 minutes later after they put ice in, they put cold water in. The church
I've never heard that.
singing songs. So yeah. So 20 minutes later, I got baptized.
That is a great
It was still hot. It was like getting in it was a hot
being in a sauna.
It was a sauna.
Wow. So the preacher, he obviously had insulated waders because he wasn't feeling the heat. I thought you could tell me it was freezing cold. I've baptized people before where they were where it was just absolutely frigid. And I remember one girl, I said, "Look, we can heat this water up for you." She goes, "No, Jesus went through this for me, so I can, go through that for him." And I was like, but the heat thing, that would be bad if you had to go to the burn unit treatment center after you got baptized. So
this was boiling hot.
Boiling hot. So Christ came into your life and he changed your life. Talk about how your life changed. I mean, I've heard you talk about this before. When you came to Christ, a lot of people, pray a prayer, walk an aisle, or maybe they're confirmed, but nothing ever changed. That wasn't the case with you, was it?
Well, it was, it definitely changed me. And there's that security of knowing that you're saved. Right. And so that really allows you not to worry about that.
Right.
And I think there's no reason that you can't give your life to Christ and not feel like that. Right. And so, yeah, sin comes in your life. Absolutely. But no one's perfect, but just being able to not worry about that. Right. So I'm able to, finish school, come to college, get married, start a family, all these things. And I tell you the interesting testimony about me, I think is, and you went to seminary, so you know this word. And I didn't know really the meaning of this term until it really happened to me like it did, was sanctification.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And it might be good for you to describe sanctification.
Well, in sanctification, in my denomination, we believe that you're in the process of being sanctified. When you receive Christ, that God declares you righteous before, the Father, and that you're going to enter eventually into a state where you're perfect, where you come before the Father and you've reached that. But throughout this life, we are in that process. When we come to know to Christ, he is bringing us closer and closer to that time when we're going to be with him and closer. And so this process of sanctification, takes a lifetime, but it is where Christ brings you. And that's what, a lot of people think, well, all those Christians think they're perfect. No, Christians know that they're not perfect. They know that they're not. They know that we need a savior. For me, I talk to people all the time and I say, Paul said he was the chief of sinners. Well, I'm pretty close. I'm pretty close to that. And so we're all in that process. But as God sanctifies us, we recognize that he is holy and that we are not. And he brings us about in that process of becoming more and more like his son, Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's been kind of a lifetime process, but just to know that that's happening is great. And a lot of times we think it's on us to do that, right? I got to do better. I got to do this. And my experience and what I'll share here is maybe just a little bit of something that I did, and then God took it from there. And so I realized that I had an idol that had kind of developed in my life. Probably, started a little bit early in college and on through my 40s. And the idol was alcohol in my life. And, on the outside looking in, you wouldn't see it. Right. And so it was a lot of times it was just thinking about it. It's that thought process of, this is great, I'm enjoying this, but boy, it sure would be, it'd be the next level up if I had some alcohol. And alcohol is a tricky subject, right? And I'm just telling my testimony here, right?
Yeah.
Alcohol affects people so differently, right? There's some people it just doesn't have much effect at all. For me, it really was a mental thing, and I really thought about it a lot. And so there's other things in my life that I had been able to get overcome that didn't have the spiritual impact that alcohol did. And so I struggled with it. Right. And so but I would never tell anyone. Right. I mean, I would just never share that to the extent that it was a problem for me. And I really didn't want to admit it. Right. This culture that we're in is it's fine. There's no big deal. It's nothing. Just enjoy your life, and alcohol's a part of it. And it wasn't for me. Thankfully, I was not an alcoholic or anything like that. There was no real physical reliance on it, but it really did bother me. And I didn't quite understand it until one Sunday morning. I was at church. I walked in and I saw a guy who was really open and honest about his alcoholism. And we would talk about it. And he was just a guy that I could trust. He was open and honest with me. He was a good friend. And I did not feel like I was a good friend to him because I had never shared this with him, Chris. And so I saw him and I gave him a hug and I said, hey, I want you to keep me accountable on this, right? I want to be done with this. I think this is not something that I need to be a part of my life. And he's like, absolutely, So he said he was going to call me that week and we would talk about it. And so I instantly just felt better. I'm like, a weight was off my shoulder of realizing there was something in my life that I couldn't deal with on my own and I needed some help. And it was just a small step, tiny step, just to admit that. But I felt better. All right. And so then I'm walking, we had Sunday school across church. So I'm walking across the lobby 10 seconds later. And I see a group of people over here on my right. There's 3 of them and they're kind of talking and they're kind of downcast. And I went over to them and I just said, hey, something wrong. And they said, Lucas Davis, who is a friend of mine, son, who was 16, said, Lucas is dead and alcohol's involved.
Wow. And
that instant, alcohol was no longer a part of my life. I haven't thought about it. I'm fine to be around it. It's just gone. And I don't hate it. It doesn't bother me to see it, but in my life, it has zero power anymore. And so the cool thing was I didn't realize at the moment, it was such a shock, right? I'd spent time in the boat with Lucas. Mike, his dad, is one of the guys in our group that catches a fish every week. Just tight. And so it hurt so bad, but it was probably 6 months later that I realized that I had taken that step of sharing with my friend, my struggle. And then God took it away it took him about 15 seconds, maybe 20. Wow. So he can work that fast. Yeah. And so it was amazing. And so, but I didn't realize at the time till later. And I thought that is when that happened. And this all is part of that. That's when I learned what true sanctification is. That God used such a terrible thing, and I struggle with that. Why did that happen? But it just showed me that he can use such an awful situation in so many different ways. So that, and then from then on, that happening, just spiritually, my connection to God just took off, right? It was all, I realize now how bad it was holding me back. But God's timing is perfect. That he wanted me to experience that change in my life. And so
that is so awesome because, there are so many people, they become a Christian and they still might have, they repented of their sin, but they fell back into it, or they have things they struggle with. And they feel like, well, am I even a Christian at all anymore? But even Christians still struggle with the sin. Even the Apostle Paul says, what I want to do, I don't do. But he says, praise be to Jesus, because he is in the process of, Jesus taking those things. And a lot of people believe this. They believe that if I'm going to become a Christian, I have to clean up my life first, and then I come to Christ. Well, you can't clean your life up. None of us are able to do that. By the very definition, we are sinners by nature and we're sinners by choice. And it takes Christ coming into our life for that process to begin. So, the old fishing analogy is, we catch the fish, but Jesus cleans them. Jesus cleans us. And, the hospital, I've heard people say this, Tim Tebow said it, I think one time. He said that, a hospital, you don't get well to go to a hospital. You go to the hospital to get well. And that's the way it is with Christ. We don't go to Christ. We don't get well and then come to Christ. We go to Christ to get well. And that's what he does. And that whole process throughout our entire lifetime of him bringing us to the place where he wants us to be. And finally, we'll enter into the kingdom of heaven is absolutely not because of what we've done, but because of what he has done for us. And man, that is a great, great place to let everybody that is listening know that if you're listening to this podcast, I don't believe it's an accident, or if you're watching, if you ever are doubting about where you're going to go, and I want you to call me. You can call me 864-414-9453, or just type in the Bass Chaplain, and I'll be the first one that comes up, and you can call me or send me an email. But I'd love to show you in the scriptures how you can know for certain if you were to die even today, that you go to be with Jesus. And it's the most important decision that JD ever made in his life. It's the most important decision that I've ever made in my life. And it will be the most important decision that you ever make in your life. So please, please give me a call day or night. I would be delighted to show you how you can have a relationship with this God that we've been talking about this whole time. Now, JD, we've come to the part of the podcast that that is one of my most beloved part of the podcast. And I'll ask all of my guests to do a fishing impersonation of their favorite Bass Pro or a Bass Pro that they feel like they can impersonate. And boy, we've had some good ones and we've had some pretty lousy ones too. But anyway, so what do you got for us today? Who would you like to impersonate? I know you've been thinking about it. So who's your impersonation?
I'm not going to name a name here, but like I said, I watch a lot of videos.
Right.
And I would say, based on living in Nashville, with my accent, I've probably done this during this video as well. So if you take an angler from the South, Alabama, Tennessee, South Carolina, right?
Right.
And you watch their videos on social media or listen to them talking on stage or talking to their friends. There's one accent. Now let's imagine you've got a wired to fish camera, Bassmaster MLF, filming with these guys, and they're supposed to talk about a fishing technique. So you go from, okay, we're fixing to do this video here. Okay, oh, camera's on. Okay, when I am skipping my bait under a dock, or when I am setting the contrast on my Lowrance units, or I am flipping or pitching, I always say my G's, because I know that internationally and on fishing videos, people want me to talk like I'm very intelligent. So I'm going to say all of my G's. And then when it's over, they go back to not saying their G. So
that's a good thing. Andy Montgomery does that. I'm going to just go call him out right there. He starts talking very precisely. Yes. When he knows that he's on camera. That's good. That's a good impersonation technique that you have there. I appreciate that. I really do. Man, that's been awesome. I can't wait. We got a Bassmaster tournament coming up at Lake Pickwick. We're not going to talk about it because we don't want those guys to get any expert information from the Bass Chaplain or from JD Blackburn about how that's going to win or who's going to win. But man, I appreciate you being my guest today. That was awesome. So excited to see how God is working in your life and all the things. And listen, if you're out there and you're thinking about becoming a professional fisherman, and you just realize, man, the professional fishing may not be the deal, but you still love, fishing. There are so many great jobs in this industry. that you can get involved in. And guys like JD Blackburn even created his own job, and that's pretty impressive. And I really appreciate you coming on today, and appreciate you being my friend and my brother. And man, it was an awesome time. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. And I would say any of those people that are curious about either becoming a pro or, trying to find some kind of, occupation in fishing, they're welcome to reach out. I had people when I started that were super gracious to me, gave me lots of advice, answered my questions. So happy to give all the free advice anybody needs. They're more than welcome to contact me. So.
Man, that is so awesome. We appreciate you being here. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to wrap it up for this week. We hope that you will hit the subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube, or subscribe on your podcast, wherever it is that you listen to our podcast. Tell somebody about our podcast. We love you. Thank you for being here. This is the Bass Chaplain Fishing Podcast, where faith and fishing hook up.